Okay, fellas, we're throwing it back for this one. AKA, I didn't feel like getting the green screen out this time.
Actually, it was a lot more effort to put all this stuff out, you're a fucking idiot.
Welcome to another episode of Crazy Thoughts, the show where I talk about the games that I've been playing since the last time I talked about the games that I've been playing, since the last time I talked about the games that I've been playing, since the last time I talked about the games that And boy do we have a good lineup for today. I have been blowing through and blowing up a bunch of games in my backlog. Stuff that I got last year that I hadn't gotten around to, and stuff I'd been wanting to get to for a long ass while, but as is the usual excuse, never got around to. And fellas, let me tell you, it can be a long, excruciating process to decide on games that I'll be covering for this series. My methods are complex, complicated, compounded by the daily dullness of life, which just makes the final choice all the more special. Now, I don't usually show this to anyone, but just for you, I will show off that very method in deciding which games have the great honor of having me play through them. Be warned, this is not for the faint of heart, nor would I recommend anyone else follow in a similar path in choosing which games for them to play. But it was going to come up sooner or later, so may as well reveal it now. Good enough. If I was going to start catching up with the greatest titles of 2023, I knew that the Nintendo fanboy in me was not going to allow anything else but the newest Mario game. The newest 2D Mario game, to be exact. And the first one since Mario Bros. U. No, Mario Maker and Run don't count. At the same time, having played through all the new Super Mario Bros. Games, I wasn't exactly sure how much more they could do with this formula, so I was a little bit skeptical going into the reveal trailer for this game, and about 5 seconds in, all of those worries were dissuaded. I was absolutely in love with what I was seeing. Like, for fuck's sakes, you finally get to play as the Yoshi-Man himself! And after I escaped editing hell, I finally get to play that smidge of Mario. And boy and howdy, is this game pretty good. It's pretty good. It'd be very easy to just call this another fun 2D Mario game and then leave it at that, but Nintendo added a surprising amount of material for this game beyond the new levels and power-ups. For starters, there are power-ups. I mean badges. You equip them at the start of the level to give Mario a number of different effects. Higher jumping, faster running, turning Mario's hat into a parachute. And while they do just kind of leave it up to the player to decide how useful they will be, the game has various levels centering around the badge's abilities. And yeah, some are more useful than others, and the Mario series ain't no stranger to badges, but I think they implemented them here pretty well. And they added some other new kinds of stages too, my particular favorite being the Search Party, where you have to find 5 hidden tokens in a small area with the potential help of players online. And boy, are some of those tokens deviously hidden, says a guy pushing 30 playing a kid's game. But the best new thing that Wonder has to offer is found within those main levels. See, the new collectible are these flower seeds, and while you do get one at the end of each level, you can also get them by finding the new Wonder Flower power-up, which, upon obtaining it, turns the entire level on its head with a weird and trippy flair. I don't want to just keep giving random examples as to how weird and trippy these sequences are, so I'll just say there's more than a few musical numbers involved. And I love it! If I didn't know better, I would say the developers were high out of their mind when coming up with this stuff. It all adds up to another great Mario game, and just a fun platformer that I feel more inclined to replay than any of the other new Super Mario Bros. Games. Even if, as has been the case with the last few Mario games, those secret levels are complete bullshit. But once I do replay it, I will absolutely be playing as this guy instead of Mario. It's like they gave you New Game Plus from the outset. Take that, Sega! Nintendo does what Sega does. Oh, God. I think I killed him. But enough about that totally garbage vanilla Mario crap, let's get back to what is now the best series on the PS2 of the ones I've played. So Ratchet & Clank has been pretty fun so far. I do have my complaints, but 3 really did kick into higher gear. Maybe whenever I replay it years down the line, I'll think it's completely overrated or totally disappointing like others think. But for now, I'm very interested in Insomniac leading harder and harder into the shooting side of their shooter platformer. So the next one up to bat is Ratchet Deadlocked, the last one of the original PS2 series, and a weirdly positioned one in the Ratchet series overall. I didn't know a whole lot about it, other than Ratchet's going on some death game show of sorts, and this is where the shooty bang bang side has just completely taken over, so as far as I'm concerned, this might be a slam dunk. And after playing it, I am going to be very bold in proclaiming this is probably my favorite one yet. Though it did take me a little bit to reach that conclusion. Now that isn't to say I wasn't liking it at first, although as the title ever so subtly implies, Clank's role in here is very diminished compared to the first 3 games. In fact, the whole narrative takes just a very simple approach throughout. But it seems that in doing so, that let the writer focus on adding even more of that biting humor that the series is known for. And that leads to a lot of funny dialogue. Probably the most since the first game. It's not as great a story overall as Up Your Arsenals, but it's consistent enough and gels with the gameplay perfectly, which is where the real meat is. By this entry, Insomniac have refined those shooting mechanics to a T, to the point where they have now structured every single level around them, and I used jumping more frequently within combat encounters than with actually jumping platforms. You know, like something you would see in a platformer. Now, the weapons themselves aren't anything particularly special, but if you thought the mods in Ratchet 3 were expansive, Deadlock will just lay its dead cock out to show you otherwise. That sounded better in my head. All of the weapons in the main story can now be upgraded to level 10, and where past games had their mods just restricted to one type of weapon, here, the mods can now be applied to any kind of weapon that you want. But initially, even considering these new additions, I wasn't super enthralled with this gameplay loop. It's the kind where I had to take a break every 2 levels or so because the gunplay was just so constant. It was pretty fun, but also pretty tiring, and so when it came to tackle that challenge mode, I really didn't know how much further this could go. And sure enough, that's where my opinion on the game took a complete 180. Here, the weapons can be upgraded to level 99, and so just blowing through every single enemy in the game with the most powerful weapons never has felt as good as it has in this game's challenge mode. I actually went and got all the skill points, which is something I had never done in this series up until now. Not even in 3. I was so into this gameplay flow that I could not stop until I got every single weapon upgraded and every single possible thing that I could do in this game done. So I'm not sure as an overall experience that it eclipses 3 completely, but again, it's probably my favorite in the series so far. Again, the harder it leans into the shooting stuff, the more I like it. And we're gonna have to leave it at that with Ratchet for now, because it's gonna take me a bit to get to those PS3 games, since I don't have one. Welcome to my hell. Sometimes when I'm going used game hunting, I will pick up a title that I have never heard of up until that point, and just buy it on a whim, especially if it's cheap. It's usually 6th generation games, because that generation was just ablaze with tons and tons of potential hidden gems. So, enter Pariah. It's a sci-fi first-person shooter that comes to us from Digital Extremes, who've actually been around for quite a while and have quite the catalog behind them. These days they're best known for Warframe, which I haven't played, but I know a few of my personal friends who have played it, so that's how far that game's reach is. But before that, they're probably best known for working with Epic Games and developing the first few Unreal and Unreal Tournament games. So it would make sense then that this game just happens to play a lot like Unreal, but I think it has enough distinguishing features to separate itself from that, as it takes place in a futuristic war-torn Earth where you play as a single medic who gets tasked to transfer a cryogenically frozen prisoner to his higher-ups before his ship gets shot down and he gets sent on a wacky journey to rescue the princess and save Alderaan. I seem to have trouble remembering what the plot was. Let me just check Wikipedia real quick. Pariah notably omits to explain key background information about the plot and the in-game universe to the player, thus causing much of the story to progress without any context or background for the player to identify with. Even at the end of the game, many key plot points remain largely unexplained, leaving it up to the player to conjecture about what really happened. Oh yeah, that's right. This game sucks. Like, I seriously cannot mince words for this one, fellas. Pariah sucks. I was heavily reminded of Killzone when going through this game, just with how slow and awkward the gunplay is, and the lack of oomph to its weapons. Don't even get me started on those vehicles. Sure, maybe it doesn't have that constant hellgas screaming, but at least that was something. This game just has nothing enthralling about it whatsoever, and thus it falls onto the plot to pick up the slack, and... Okay, well, it's not actually that difficult to follow as the Wikipedia blurb implied it would be. It's not good. Just like with the shooting, it stays in one mode for the majority of its playtime and does not develop its characters or world very well. But if it kept staying in that lane for the duration of the story and just be completely predictable, then I could just write it off as mid overall. But right at the end, it careens off into an unforeseen ditch and completely sours the whole experience. Getting through this crap and then being hit in the face with that shit ending made me appreciate Killzone a whole lot more. And any game that does that belongs in the trash. Not a fan. Let's just say it took them a while for them to find their footing. So in addition to trying to play catch up with 2023, I'm also still playing catch up with 2022. The whole moving out of the home that I grew up in phase of my life kept me from enjoying a lot of the newest and goodest games of that year, and one on my radar that I was very, very interested in was Neon White. You're telling me that they made a first-person shooter platformer with an emphasis on speedrunning, and they mixed in Persona social elements too? Next you're gonna tell me that they made a game that combines DMC combat with rhythm game mechanics. Ridiculous. I'll get to that one eventually. But yeah, that's the idea behind Neon White, and just to cut to the chase, I had a great time with it. You play as a former criminal and newly deaded fella named White, who gets snapped up from hell to do a bunch of menial work in order to get a slim chance of staying in heaven. And that menial work involves killing a bunch of demons using your standard FPS weapons. The twist here is that those weapons come in the form of cards, and you can use them until you either run out of ammo, or you discard them, which activates that weapon's secret ability, like getting an extra jump, or shooting out an explosive blob, or just ramming straight into an enemy at full force. All of which you use to get through the level and kill all those demons as fast as possible. And figuring out the best route to do so is where the game truly shines. It does take a bit to get used to the feel of it, the jumping is especially floaty, but each level is built like a puzzle. It lays out all the pieces for you to fit together and find that best route, and every time you complete that puzzle you feel like a god. If you wanted to get into the mindset of a speedrunner, but don't want to actually engage in speedrunning with games that aren't designed around that, And this is the closest that you'll get. And that dopamine rush that hits every single time that I got those platinum medals, by the way, I got all of them, never gets old. Oh yeah, there's also a story wrapped around the whole demon killing gameplay. But who cares about that when the gameplay is so good? So, White's old crime team members are also in heaven doing the demon slaying thing, and you can hang with them in between missions and learn about his old relationships with them and the dark secrets hidden within, as well as figure out the whole mystery behind the demon slaying thing. Because there's something unholy about this heaven situation. That's all I'm saying. All I'm saying. Is all I'm saying. Persona's the obvious comparison point, but I would actually put it a little closer to Danganronpa in its social elements. And I say that not because the low-key manic vibe is much closer to that game's tone, but more so that they use the exact same fucking font that Danganronpa uses for its dialogue. You can't sneak that one past me, fellas. I put over 100 hours into that series. I'm going to notice. So that already sets up some expectations, and I don't like saying that something is trying too hard, but that's kind of how I felt about the writing, and it took a while for that feeling to shake off. It was still enjoyable, don't get me wrong, and I appreciate the focus on White and the dilemmas he gets put through. It's just unfortunate that it comes at the expense of the other characters not being nearly as interesting as he is. With the exception of the main villain, I do like them. The voice acting didn't really help matters either when you have the likes of Prosy D and the creator of OKKO going up against goddamn Steve Blum. But like I said, it's still enjoyable. It's a good framework for that gameplay. And I would wholly recommend the game based on that gameplay alone. So in the last episode, I regaled to you all my Virgin Pacman World tale. And if you'll recall that tale for a moment, I also mentioned that its sequel was the one that I had nostalgic attachment for. And that got me wondering how well it's aged after all this time. Hell, I was tempted to make an entire video out of it, as is my first instinct for any of my childhood memories, but I was getting ahead of myself. If we were going to reach that point, the first thing I had to do with this game is finally complete it, which for as much nostalgic attachment I have for it, something I never actually did before. Like, I've made a few attempts, and I even tried to 100% it at one point in the past. I remember it being kind of annoying too, but I don't know, I just never really bothered to get through it all. But that was probably just because it was kid me who sucked at video games, as opposed to adult me who sucks slightly less at video games. Curiosity got the better of me in this situation, and so I got my brother to loan me his copy, which he got in the divorce, and I played through all of it. I completed this game for the very first time in my life. And boy, do those nostalgic goggles work wonders. So Pacman World 2 has a pretty similar structure to the first game. You play as Pac-Man, the ghosts have stolen something precious from Pac-Man. This time it's a bunch of golden fruit that once picked unleashes an evil creature hell-bent on wiping out the Pac race. Can you even call them a race? Species? What are these things? And in order to do that, Pac-Man has to go through a great variety of worlds to defeat these creatures and get that golden fruit back. And it plays mostly the same as well, and has most of the same features and mechanics that the first game did. It's got the pack dots, it's got the ghosts, it's got the rev roll, it's got the butt bounce, it's got the mazes, it's got the butt bounce. But the letters that you collected throughout the first game are now replaced with tokens, and they're spread throughout each level and can be used to play emulated versions of old Pac-Man arcade games. It's a neat bonus for anyone wanting to 100% the game and get all of the arcade machines, something that did seem doable at first. And the levels are now closer to a more open design than the first game had, and you have more freedom with your movement. Even though Crash Bandicoot is very much in its DNA, it works pretty well. At first. That collectathon itch gets scratched plenty, and now the game actually keeps track of how many fruit and pack dots that you get throughout the level, but telling you how much you got at the end of each level. Not to worry though, if you do miss something, you can simply go back through the entire level and collect everything again. Yep, just like OG Banjo-Kazooie. Everyone loves OG Banjo-Kazooie, don't they? I urge anyone who wants to play this game or is also wanting to replay this title, do not go for 100%. Those first few levels, pretty breezy. I enjoyed them. But as soon as you hit that ice world, everything just goes off a cliff. Because the levels in there are not built around getting all of the collectibles in an easy manner. Obviously, there's ice physics to deal with, but the other two levels are basically auto runners, where it's very, very, very easy to miss those collectibles, especially the pack dots. Oh, and did I forget to mention that there are time trials too, where you have to go through each level again and beat it within a certain time to get even more of those tokens I mentioned earlier? When an online guide showing how to get every single collectible in the game and beat every single time trial labels half of the game's levels as "this is incredibly difficult," it's not a great sign. I think Kid Me was onto something, because I don't think I've ever played a platformer that has actively dissuaded me from trying to 100% it. Not even the first game did that, because even though it didn't really keep track of those collectibles, I can see a version of myself going through all of that game and getting everything. The only really annoying parts of that game are the bosses. Speaking of which, that aspect has actually been significantly diminished here. I mean, yeah, I know people hate the Clyde boss, but compared to Anubis or fucking Talkman from the first game, that thing was a breeze. No. If you want to know what the worst enemy in the game is, it's the camera. And a bad camera in a 3D platformer is like mixing ammonium and bleach. And following the ice world, the rest of the game was just whatever. I read through the manual on this thing a bunch of times, and I'd always wonder what the layer levels would be like, especially the underwater ones. And they're just 3 automatic levels in a row. Suffice to say, Pacman World 2 suffers from a severe lack of polish. And the devs knew this, as is evident with the numerous differences between different console versions and even different regional variants of the game. Seriously, the number of tweaks made in between each version is a fascinating example of pre-patching techniques. I'm very much hoping that Bamco does a repack for this one too, because it needs it a lot more than the first game did. Last but not least, let's talk about one of the hottest games from last year. Last month. Last week? Yesterday? Okay, the zeitgeist has just been moving around at random, as is usually the case, but I still want to talk about Lethal Company. This game puts you in the role of a lowly spaceman who has been tasked with going around to various planets and collecting all the junk within its facilities to sell them to your lethal company. The planets are relatively static, but those facilities are always randomly generated in terms of loot, layout, and the monsters that will pop up to utterly wreck your shit. You can have up to 3 players in the vanilla version to help with gathering that junk, and if you and your crew somehow keep yourselves from getting decapitated, falling, or being fucking shot, then the money you get from selling that junk to the company, providing you meet your quota, can be used to buy upgrades and equipment to make the treasure hunting even easier. But if you don't meet that quota by the end of the 3-day cycle, it's off to the vast reaches of space for you. There's no end goal here or even a major story to experience. You just keep plugging away at those space mines like the corporate slave that you are. Feels like there's some kind of metaphor in here. So I had been gifted a copy of Lethal Company about a month after its release, just when it was ramping up with its initial popularity. A friend of mine really wanted to play it, and okay, let me diverge here a little bit, tell you my experience of multiplayer games. Because I'm not super duper into them, like the long form ones that make you want to keep playing them over and over again. But I did put a good amount of time into GoldenEye Wii 4v4 online Call of Duty mode, as well as Team Fortress 2 during my college years, and Rocket League 2, why not? But I usually don't like sticking with one game for a long period of time. I want to experience as many games and stories as possible within my short lifespan. Those controversy agents are going to be kidnapping me any day now, I can feel it. The last multiplayer game that really, really hooked me was PUBG, when the Battle Royale concept was still fresh and exciting and invigorating to play. Like, you could not stop me from playing that game for hours and hours on end, day after day. Apex, Fortnite, not even totally accurate Battlegrounds could pull me away from that game. And nothing I'd played since, besides your regular party games, had felt as exhilarating to me like PUBG did. So when I say that Lethal Company is the closest game that I have played that's gotten me to that same kind of exhilaration, I do not say that lightly. This game rocks. It's got that beautiful risk-reward mechanic with how the monsters erratically behave and where all the loot is placed. It's just perfect strategy planning and teamwork amongst your teammates. Going at it alone, don't even bother. You always gotta play with other people with this game. Don't not bother with that shit. And for as funny as it can be seeing other players get shot up by a turret or eaten by a worm or getting coil-headed for the first time, that unpredictability lends a great amount of tension, making it become the most I have been scared with a game since... Alien Isolation. For example, when I first encountered a Thumper, which is a creature that will just run straight at you as soon as you're in its line of sight, is when it was at the very, very end of a dark, dark hallway, like perfectly centered. And as I have explained before, that shit freaks me out. So combine that with its insane speed and its yell, and I am just fucking flailing my arms around and screaming at the top of my lungs. It is... oh, God. It's pretty fun, what can I say? I will admit though, the luster has faded a bit quicker than it did with PUBG, and I'm not really sure how much longevity it will have. Likely because, again, there's no real end goal beyond getting through as many quotas as possible. But I'm still having a lot of fun with it, and that's all that really matters for now. It has fucking robots that shoot rockets at you. What more could you want? I just noticed this motherfucker has been up here the entire time I've been talking about Lethal Company. Get away from me, you shitbag. And that will do it for this episode of Crazy Thoughts. I hope it was suitably crazy and thoughty. Next time we might go back to the green screen, or we'll continue with this setup too. It's not terrible, but we'll see. And also next time we'll be talking about that new Paper Mario game that everyone has been clamoring about, as well as that one Kodaka game I have owned for about a year now, but I've not played yet. In the meantime, please let me know if you have played Warframe, and if Digital Extremes are now the goated game developer of all time. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you later. Oh, it was a mistake to use this chair, not the office one. Oh, my ass hurts.